Welcome to Books Recapped. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. The Hobbit. First part, Chapter 1 to 10. Bilbo Baggins was a hobbit who lived in a cozy underground dwelling called Bag End in the land of Middle-earth. Hobbits were small creatures, about half the size of humans, with thick hair on their feet and a love for good food and comfort. Bilbo's family was somewhat noble in Hobbit standards, with his father coming from a well-to-do, conventional family, and his mother from a wealthy, eccentric family known for their love of adventure. Despite his mother's influence, Bilbo preferred to live a quiet life at home. One day, while enjoying a pipe outside his front door, an old man with a long cloak and staff appeared. The man introduced himself as the wizard Gandalf, whom Bilbo recognized as the creator of spectacular fireworks displays in Hobbiton. When Gandalf asked if Bilbo would like to go on an adventure, Bilbo declined and excused himself. He invited Gandalf over for tea just to be polite, but he really wanted nothing to do with the old wizard and his adventures. The next afternoon, Bilbo heard the doorbell ring and assumed it was Gandalf. To his surprise, a dwarf named Walleen pushed past him and sat down to eat. Soon, other dwarves arrived, and Bilbo's neat little home became crowded with dwarves. Bilbo became increasingly confused and annoyed, until Gandalf arrived with the head dwarf, Thorin. The 13 dwarves and the wizard nearly cleaned out Bilbo's pantry before finally settling down to discuss their business. It became clear that Gandalf had volunteered Bilbo to be a burglar for the dwarves on their adventure. Bilbo protested, and the dwarves grumbled that the soft little hobbit seemed unsuitable for their adventure. However, Gandalf was certain that Bilbo was useful and insisted that there was more to the hobbit than meets the eye. The wizard then brought out an old map of a great mountain and pointed to a secret entrance, a door which Thorin held the key to. Bilbo asked for clarification on the purpose of the expedition. Thorin explained that his grandfather, Thur, had mined the mountain shown on the map and discovered a wealth of gold and jewels. Thur became king under the mountain, but his treasure attracted unwanted attention, and a dragon named Smaug came and killed or scattered all of Thur's people. The dragon has guarded the treasure ever since. Thorin and the dwarves were out to reclaim their inheritance, even though they were unsure of what to do with Smaug when they found him. Bilbo suspected that the dwarves wanted him to help slay the dragon. Although his conventional side wanted nothing more than to stay at home with his pipe, the influence of his mother's adventurous spirit fueled his curiosity about the adventure, and he was reluctantly excited by the tales of dragons and treasure and great battles. After looking at the map and discussing the adventure with the company, Bilbo made beds for all his guests and spent the night in troubled dreams. Unsure of what the future held, Bilbo had awoken late the morning after Gandalf's visit, surprised to find the dwarves had left without him. As he sat down to breakfast, Gandalf arrived and rushed him off to the Green Dragon Inn, where Thorin and the rest of the dwarves were waiting to begin their journey. The group set off, with Bilbo sulking at having to leave without finishing his breakfast or making proper preparations. As the day went on, the weather turned to rain, and the group grew tired, hungry, and annoyed at Gandalf's disappearance. As dusk approached, they saw a fire in the distance and went to investigate. Bilbo was sent ahead as the group's burglar, and upon approaching a clearing in the woods, he saw 3 huge trolls eating mutton around a fire. Bilbo tried to steal one of the trolls' money purses, but they heard him and captured him. The trolls argued over how to interrogate Bilbo as the dwarves arrived one by one, each being captured and put in a sack. The trolls decided to cook the dwarves, but then a voice which sounded like one of the trolls started an argument, causing the trolls to start fighting again. This continued until dawn, when the sun rose and turned the trolls to stone. Gandalf then revealed that he had been using his voice to mislead the dwarves and keep the trolls arguing until morning. He and Bilbo freed the dwarves, who were shaken but otherwise unharmed. The group searched the area and found the trolls' cave, filled with valuable weapons which they took as payment for their troubles. The next morning, Gandalf informed the group that he had checked the road ahead and their next safe stop was Rivendell, a city of elves located near the Misty Mountains. Upon arriving in Rivendell, they were invited to eat and rest. There, they met Elrond, a powerful elf who was able to interpret the ancient runes on their new weapons and Thorin's map of the mountain. Elrond revealed that the swords taken from the trolls were famous goblin killers from the great wars between the elves and goblins, and that Gandalf's sword was called Glamdring and Thorin's was called Orcrist. Elrond was also able to read moon letters on Thorin's map, describing how to find the secret entrance to the Lonely Mountain. Despite being puzzled by the message, the group left Rivendell in high spirits, well-rested and prepared for the road ahead. They had been advised by the wise Elrond and the powerful Gandalf to take a certain path over the mountain range, but even with this guidance, the journey was difficult. The group was forced to take shelter in a cave during a violent thunderstorm, and it was here that they were ambushed by a horde of goblins. The goblins dragged the dwarves and Bilbo deep into the mountain, where they were confronted by the Great Goblin. He demanded to know what they were doing in his mountain. Upon seeing the sword Orcrist, which was wielded by Thorin, he flew into a rage. The Great Goblin lunged at Thorin, ready to eat him, but before he could, the torches in the cavern were extinguished, and the sparks from the great fire threw the goblins into chaos. In the darkness, a sword flashed and struck down the Great Goblin. The voice of Gandalf guided the captives out of the chamber, and they fled deeper into the mountain, with the goblins hot on their heels. One of the goblins caught up to Dori, who was carrying Bilbo on his back, and the hobbit fell to the ground and lost consciousness. When he awoke, he was alone in the darkness, unsure of where the rest of the group was or how to escape. As he wandered through the underground tunnels, Bilbo stumbled upon an underground lake and met the strange creature Gollum. Gollum was interested in the Hobbit and proposed a riddle game, with the stakes being that if Gollum won, he would eat Bilbo, but if Bilbo won, Gollum would show him the way out. Bilbo won the game through trickery, and Gollum, suspecting the Hobbit of stealing his precious ring, chased after him. By sheer luck, Bilbo put on the ring he had found and became invisible, allowing him to slip past Gollum and escape through the door to freedom. The journey over the Misty Mountains may have been filled with danger and uncertainty, but Bilbo's quick thinking and resourcefulness helped him emerge victorious. Bilbo Baggins had finally made it through the Misty Mountains, thanks to the magic ring that kept him invisible. When he stumbled upon Gandalf and the dwarves, they were just considering whether to leave without him. The Hobbit surprised them by revealing his escape from Gollum and the goblins, though he kept the magic ring a secret. Gandalf urged the group to keep moving, as the sunlight was the only thing keeping the goblins at bay. They were now north of where they had planned to be, and they had a difficult journey ahead. As evening fell, they passed through a grove of trees and were confronted by wargs, wolf-like creatures that were allies of the goblins. They barely had time to climb the trees before the wargs attacked, and the goblins soon arrived, laughing at the group's predicament and lighting fires under the trees to smoke them out. Gandalf prepared to fight the goblins, hoping to take as many of them down as he could before he was killed. Luckily, the Lord of the Eagles saw the commotion and came to the rescue with a group of other eagles. They picked up the travelers and flew them to safety, offering them food and rest. The eagles were friends of Gandalf's and enemies of the goblins, and they were happy to help the group. Gandalf had to leave again, but promised to stay long enough to help the group find food and ponies to travel through Mirkwood, their last major obstacle before reaching the Lonely Mountain. He took them to the home of Bjorn, a half-man, half-bear creature with a wooden house in the woods outside Mirkwood. Gandalf told Bjorn the story of their adventure in the mountain, and Bjorn, who hated goblins, offered them food and lodging. Bjorn also learned that the wargs and goblins had formed an attack party to find the dwarves and wizard who had killed their leader, the Great Goblin. To evade them, Bjorn recommended taking the northern past the elf path through Mirkwood, which would bring them near the Lonely Mountain. This would throw the goblins off their trail and allow them to bypass the dangerous southern pass. Bjorn warned them never to stray from the path, as dark things lurked in Mirkwood that even Gandalf didn't know about. Bjorn provided the group with food and ponies to get to the start of the path, but they would have to return the ponies and continue on foot. Gandalf also left at this point, reminding the group to stay on the path. The Hobbit and dwarves then set off into the forest. As the darkness enveloped Bilbo and the dwarves, they ventured deeper into the ominous Mirkwood forest. Strange eyes seemed to watch them from the trees, and soon they lost track of time. All they could think about was finding a way out, but the dense woods seemed to go on forever. They stumbled upon a stream that Bjorn had warned them not to cross, but Bombur, one of the dwarves, fell in and was put into a deep sleep. The rest of the party was forced to carry him as they trudged through the forest, hungry, tired, and scared. One night, they saw flickering lights in the distance. Ignoring the warnings of Bjorn and Gandalf, they left the path and approached the lights. They saw elves sitting around a fire, singing and feasting, but as soon as they burst into the clearing, the lights went out and the dwarves and Bilbo struggled to find each other. The same thing happened once more, until finally, everyone became separated and Bilbo stopped hearing voices. Exhausted, he leaned against a tree and fell asleep. When he woke up, his legs were bound with sticky thread and a giant spider was approaching him. He pulled out his sword and cut himself free, slaying the spider in the process. He named his sword Sting and set off to find the dwarves. To his horror, he found them all hanging from a tree, trapped in the webs of the spiders that sat atop the branches. Bilbo threw stones at the spiders and led them away from the dwarves by shouting, all the while wearing the ring that made him invisible. After leading the spiders away, Bilbo sneaked back and cut the dwarves free, but the spiders soon returned. The dwarves, weakened by the spiders' poison, could hardly fight them off, even with the invisible Bilbo's help. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the spiders suddenly retreated. The company realized that they had stumbled into one of the clearings used by the elves and rested there to plan their next move. But they quickly realized that Thorin was missing. Unbeknownst to the others, Thorin was taken prisoner by a group of wood elves. The elves, who were good but suspicious of strangers, questioned Thorin about their destination, but he refused to reveal their plan to reclaim treasure from the dragon Smaug. As a result, Thorin was thrown into the dungeon. Meanwhile, the rest of the dwarves, including Bilbo, were captured by the elves after escaping an attack by giant spiders. Bilbo, who was wearing a ring that made him invisible, remained undetected. Like Thorin, the dwarves were thrown into the dungeon after refusing to reveal their plan to the Elven King. Bilbo, who had followed the captured dwarves, walked invisibly through the halls, whispering to the dwarves in their cells and plotting an escape. He managed to steal the keys from a guardsman and free the dwarves, packing each one into an empty barrel in the elves' storeroom. Just before the elves returned, Bilbo jumped into an empty barrel himself. The barrels were then pushed into a river that flowed under the elves' dwelling and were sent downstream towards Lake Town. The dwarves and Bilbo used this opportunity to make their escape, using the barrels as a means of transportation. They emerged from the barrels and made their way towards Lake Town, finally free from the clutches of the wood elves. The barrels flowed down the river, out of the Mirkwood forest, with one hobbit on top and 13 dwarves inside. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, looked to the north and saw the Lonely Mountain, the group's ultimate destination. But for now, the river took them towards Lake Town. Lake Town was a human city, built on the shores of Long Lake, just south of the Lonely Mountain. When the barrels were brought to shore by boats from the town, the dwarves and Bilbo were freed. Thorin Oakenshield, the leader of the dwarves, declared to the master of Lake Town that he was a descendant of the king under the mountain and had returned to claim his inheritance. The people of the town rejoiced at the news, as they had all heard the stories of how gold flowed down the river when the king under the mountain reigned before Smaug the dragon came and took over the mountain. They treated the dwarves and Bilbo like royalty, offering them food, shelter, and any provisions they needed. After a fortnight, the group was strong and eager to continue their journey, though they still had no idea how they would deal with the dragon. Thorin felt that they couldn't wait any longer. He obtained boats, horses, and provisions from the master of Lake Town, and the company set off up the river running towards the Lonely Mountain. This is the end of Part 1. Part 2 will start with Chapter 11. Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to our channel. Pressing a like and commenting would help us greatly. You can also support us on Patreon, link in the description. See you soon on Books Recapped.